Check. We offer free shipping, 90-day supplies, and we bill Medicare or your insurance directly. Call now and say goodbye to finger pricks.
800-417-0851. 800-417-0851. 800-417-0851. That's 800-417-0851.
Morning, Mama. How you feeling?
Great, and I'm ready for you today.
I'm checking in on you. Morning meditation?
Check.
Dressed and ready to work out?
Check.
Check your blood pressure yet?
And check.
Boom! Great job, Mom. And about those gold earrings?
No, ma'am.
Now more than ever, it's important that we protect our hearts and the hearts of those we love. Monitor your blood pressure daily and help each other stay motivated. Rally your squad to take the online pledge at releasethepressure.org. Brought to you by the Release the Pressure Coalition and the Ad Council.
Hey, I'm Tom, host of the Consumer Guide Car Stuff podcast. Join us Sundays at 1 p.m. as the editors of Consumer Guide Automotive look at what matters most to people who own, love, or simply have to live with automobiles. Listen in for the latest news, great guests, expert analysis, and occasionally irreverent takes on what's happening in the auto world. We'll try and entertain you and maybe even save you a little money. That's the Consumer Guide Car Stuff podcast, Sundays at 1 p.m. right here on WCPT AM 820.
Tolerance is accepting someone before they walk through the door.
It's about accepting people for who they are as individuals.
Tolerance is celebrating the diversity that makes us great.
Tolerance. Honor the differences.
Picture a world of respect. Visit tolerance.org to learn more.
The family meeting.
I don't want to wear pants. The pants are restrictive. You shouldn't force me to have to wear pants. Right? I'm a confirmed nudist.
Yes.
I want to be butt naked. Can't force me to wear clothes. I can't get my share of vitamin D because I have these clothes covering up my skin.
That shirt.
Right.
That shirt is preventing him from health.
Right. It's restricting my freedoms. Now, how damn stupid is that?
Sundays at 4. The family meeting is brought to you by Property Tax Solutions. If they can't lower your property taxes, you don't pay.
This is a WCPT moment in labor. When Serena Williams won her title at the Tennis Grand Slam tournament, we know she gets the same prize money as her male counterpart. However, prior to 1973, that wasn't always the case. When Billie Jean King captured her first Wimbledon title in 1966, she was surprised to find out that the winner of the men's tournament received 2,000 pounds, while she only received 750 pounds. After being unable to find any tournaments for women, King and 8 other women formed their own tournament, the Virginia Slims Invitational, where each woman was paid $1 before posing for the famous picture of them each holding up their dollar, with the caption, "Contract Pros." While the move was bold, the pay discrepancies continued. King threatened to boycott the 1973 U.S. Open unless the women were paid the same as the men. Thanks to a grant from Band Deodorant, both the men and women's singles would take home $25,000. Despite the progress at the U.S. Open, it wouldn't be until 1984 that the Australian Open would execute equal pay, followed by the French Open in 2006, and finally Wimbledon in 2007. This has been a WCPT moment in labor. We're fighting for your rights.
WCPT encourages you to think green. A healthy compost pile is easy to maintain with a few simple steps. Composting relies on heat, water, air, and a mixture of greens, fresh grass clippings, spent flowers, and fruit and vegetable scraps, and browns, straw, dried leaves, and pine needles. Add smashed up eggshells, coffee grounds, tea bags, and even shredded black and white newspaper. Do not add animal products, meat, dairy, gravy, bones, and mayo, or grease and oils to prevent unpleasant odors that could attract animals. Keep a container in the kitchen to collect vegetable scraps to add to the compost pile periodically. Every few weeks, mix the material with a hoe, pitchfork, or sturdy rake to aerate the pile and distribute moisture evenly. In about 6 months, your compost will look like soil and it can be used to supplement your garden. For more information about composting from the Chicago Botanic Garden, visit chicagobotanic.org.
What's this? A piece of toast? A pretzel stick? Popcorn? What blockhead cooked all this? What kind of a Thanksgiving dinner is this? Where's the turkey, Chuck? Don't you know anything about Thanksgiving dinners? Where's the mashed potatoes? Where's the cranberry sauce? Where's the pumpkin pie?
You are listening to Think Theory Radio.
Radio.
Hello and welcome to Think Theory Radio, the show that brings you topics outside the mainstream realm of thought and ideas to make you think. And I'm your host, Damian Perdue, and I am joined by Paulie C.
Yo, yo, yo!
And the C stands for cranberry. Cranberry sauce. Or do you prefer the canned cranberries? The nice big gelatinous.
I do have a soft spot for the gelatinous, but I like the real cranberries. I like
for sure.
Yeah, and anytime you can slave over a stove with cranberries and sugar and whatnot, when the effort is put in.
Mm-hmm.
But don't get me wrong, I love that gelatinous can shaped.
Yeah. Oh, it's classic.
Yeah.
What more American is than that, than canned cranberries. And so basically today is another episode of Damian Ruins Everything.
Yep.
The Thanksgiving edition.
Here we go.
Well, I figured, since this is the couple days after Thanksgiving, it's perfect because, people already had their festivities, they met up with their family, and now I can, crush.
Yeah, no one's going to get indigestion. It should all be processed now. I was waiting for you to be like, Paul, did you celebrate Thanksgiving? How was it? Oh, it was great, Damian. Shame on you.
Right. Well, that too.
Yeah.
That's part of it. We're going to decolonize Thanksgiving right now. That's what we're about to do. And kind of explore a lot of the myths surrounding this annual American tradition that in a lot of ways really epitomizes the United States and American culture, not just from the fact of this kind of whitewashing and colonialism, but then to modern days of, just pure gluttony and sports and then shopping. It's and digging a lot of stuff. It was actually kind of cool researching it because I learned a lot that I didn't know about the origins of Thanksgiving and a lot of what happened. I mean, I knew there was a lot of lies or mistellings, I should say.
So you're going to get into it, but really, did Squanto help the Pilgrims in that first winter to...
Not the first winter.
Okay.
And actually, no, he didn't really... He did help them. Tisquantum was his real name.
Okay.
Squanto was what the English called him.
Sure.
So it was kind of his
whitewashed name.
His kind of making fun of him kind of thing. They like to give a lot of, people nicknames.
Yeah.
One of the, we'll get into a little bit, but one of them they called King Philip.
So if it was modern day, he probably would have been called Squants.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
little Squant.
Squanto feels a little old school.
Yeah.
Yeah, little Squants.
Which
Squanty.
Tisquantum is a pretty cool name.
Yeah.
It's like quantum.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And tis quantum.
He is the quantum. For those of you playing at home.
He actually, his story would make for a great movie. Now, he was abducted by the English. Him and several other indigenous men.
Sounds about white.
Yeah. They were tricked to come on this boat. Hey, guys, come check this out. And then took them off to England as slaves.
Okay.
And then he was able to get back to the States.
And then wanted to help Englishmen.
But in a kind of a quid pro quo kind of thing where... it's weird because in a way... his life was saved by becoming a slave.
Okay.
So in the years that he was in England, or, in Europe, I don't know if he... No, actually he went to Spain.
Okay.
He went to Spain. The English brought him over there, but...
of course, because,
Yeah.
I mean, they had... weren't they like the kings of the slave trade or whatever? Yeah, the English,
Mm-hmm. And that's what a lot of people don't realize is, when we think about the slave trade, we only think about them bringing Africans here, but we don't think about the export of indigenous people from the Americas to Europe, which was happening a lot as well. And during the time, his tribe, the Patuxet, I believe, and I apologize to any indigenous people if I'm going to mess up these names because there's a lot of different tribes and different leaders' names throughout this historical story. And basically what happened was his tribe was wiped out by what they think was probably the smallpox. So the earlier European colonizers that came in brought this beautiful virus, speaking, which we can relate to nowadays, right? And literally his tribe was gone. He was the sole survivor.
Wow.
So by the time he came back, I think it was 3 years later, he was the last one left. And at this point, he spoke perfect English. He became kind of a translator in between tribes and Englishmen. And he helped, he actually introduced the Pilgrims to what one of the names is Massasoit, which is more of a name like leader, but his actual name, I'm trying to find. Oh, it's not in this one, but I'll get back to that. But basically, he introduced them to the leader of the Wampanoag tribe and became the kind of translator and middleman between them, and they established a treaty. Now, this didn't happen in the first winter. It happened basically the next spring, I believe. So in the first winter when they got there, the Pilgrims were kind of on their own a little bit, and the Wampanoag tribe, they, were kind of keeping tabs on them. They also have been cut down by epidemics and, other European invaders. So their tribe had gotten really smaller from I think they had 300,000 people to about 5,000 or 3,000 people by the time the Pilgrims got there. And they were living basically right across the water from them, so they could see the Pilgrims right there. And they kind of kept, they didn't know. At this point, they were pretty leery of Europeans coming in because they had been already trading and fighting with the Europeans for about 100 years. And so anytime, new Europeans would come in, they were kind of, keeping their eye on them. So they kept tabs on them that whole winter. And about half of the Pilgrims died off. And then around the springtime, they decided, the leader of the Wampanoags, they decided, it might be beneficial to create some kind of treaty with them because the Pilgrims had guns. There was a lot of kind of rivalries with other tribes. So they created this kind of treaty where, they would help each other in defense mostly, but also they did teach them how to farm corn. There was this whole thing about adding herring. I guess they would use herring to make the corn grow.
Yeah, I remember that from the old teachings.
Okay.
They'd put a fish in the ground with the seed, I guess, or
I mean, even the whole thing, it's and you get a lot of different kind of perspectives when you try to look up this story. From one thing I read said that the Pilgrims didn't even call themselves Pilgrims. Now, they were actually separatists. That was their religious moniker, their religious belief system, and they were closely related to the Puritans, but they were a little different. And when they came over, actually the majority of the people on the Mayflower weren't even Pilgrims. There was 102 people on there, and it was only 40 of them were Pilgrims. The rest they called strangers.
What?
Yeah, so the whole voyage was the kind of nicknamed it Saints and Strangers.
So did they get to go to Plymouth Rock as well, or were they part of
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, basically, so
the Mayflower Compact or whatever was that?
Yeah. Well, the Mayflower Compact was basically because the majority of the people on the Mayflower were kind of sailors or just kind of workers or entrepreneurs that wanted to come to the New World to make money. Because you got to remember, they thought they were going to Virginia. They thought they were going to Jamestown.
Okay.
So they thought they were going to be set up already. They'll get in town, they'll start making money, send it back to family in England or whatever.
Boy, they were way off.
They were way off. And what's funny is I read it which I couldn't really find much confirmation, but it's an interesting kind of little sidetrack thing where there's a conspiracy theory that the captain of the Mayflower was bribed by settlers, in Jamestown to steer them off course. And he did kind of literally just they ended up in Massachusetts, and he, once they got off the boat, he was like, "See you later," and he went back.
Oh.
So maybe, I don't know. You never know. But I couldn't find much more than that kind of statement, which it's probably not true. But anyway, I had to fit in some kind of conspiracy in here.
Sure,
right?
sure.
And so, interestingly enough, the majority of the people on board, they didn't even really like the Pilgrims, because the Pilgrims were a little bit more conservative, religious types, and the strangers, as they called them, I mean, they literally called these other people strangers on their boat, and they were traveling together for like over 2 months. And they were kind of, these were a little more rough and tumble, mostly men, I think. And so the Mayflower Compact, they created that because when they ended up in Massachusetts, they were outside of King James territory. So they were worried that the strangers wouldn't abide by the laws. So they created this Mayflower Compact to kind of be like, look, if you sign this, you got to abide by King James laws, and it's interesting because some people try to say, oh, well, that was the influence of the, Declaration of Independence, Constitution, everything. And in a way, it was. You had the kind of like everyone living equal statement on it or whatever. But the very first line says, in dedication to our sovereign Lord, King James the First, so it was obviously towards the, the oligarchy.
Clearly an English settlement and not a independent colony.
Exactly. Yeah, because they had to, they owed the money, they had to send the money back. And the other kind of myth, too, that we can explore is the religious freedom thing. We're always told, they came here in search of religious freedom. Well, actually, they had religious freedom already in Amsterdam and also Leiden, Netherlands. So they had went from England to Holland in search of religious freedom, and they found it there.
I don't know about you. If I had the option between Amsterdam and Massachusetts, you know where I'm going.
Right. Yeah, I don't think there was any hash yet in Massachusetts. But the Pilgrims, I don't know if they were too much involved in that side of it. And actually, that was kind of one of the things that led them to want to leave, is that there was a lot of debauchery going on in Amsterdam and in Holland, because you had this port town and you had like hundreds of bars and prostitution going on. And at the same time, they identified as English people, and they felt they were losing themselves in this Dutch culture. So they wanted to get out of that. But they, instead of like religious freedom would imply that everyone was free to practice whatever, right? But they actually wanted to come here and establish more of like, kind of religious oligarchy. Like they wanted it to be their religion, there's the separatists. So it wasn't about coming here like, yeah, we're separatists, you guys can be whatever. And this, it's like, no, you have to be also separatist. This is, we're trying to establish this. And, that was a lot of the problems too with what ends up happening with the native tribes and how they ended up taking all this land. They subjugated people to English laws. So it's interesting how this kind of relationship between the Pilgrims and the Wampanoag tribe and other tribes as well, but this was the main one. And how, it actually was a long time. Like, and there's different, like I said, you look it up and you find different interpretations of it. Some people say it was 50 years of peace. And it wasn't until Massasoit's son who became the leader, and then English gave him the nickname of King Philip. And that he started going after the Europeans because he was sick of them taking their land. And they did that for the 50 years, so instead of like, oh yeah, it was 50 years of peace, but at the same time, they were basically like gentrifying the area, and using English laws to kind of take over an area where, these tribes had been for thousands of years, right? So, by the time the new leader stepped in, he was kind of sick of it, and he started kind of warring at him, and they caught him, cut off his head, and put his head on a spike. Him and I believe his wife.
Wow.
Yeah. They were wonderful, lovely people, the Pilgrims.
Yeah, right.
So peaceful.
And religious.
Yes.
Very religious.
Such a Jesus thing to do.
Yeah, right. Yeah, put people's heads on a pike.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so there's much more to this story. And also I want to get into a little bit about Native Americans' contributions to the United States and to the world. There's a lot of things that they gave us that we don't realize. So if you want to jump in on the conversation, give us a call, 773-763-9278. That's 773-763-WCPT. And we'll be back with more Think Theory Radio.
Hi everyone, it's me, Tooth 19. I can't believe I'm watching my brother, Tooth 30, get his first root canal today. I told him that black hole didn't look pretty. It got so painful it kept all 32 of us up last night, in agony. Thank goodness Total Dentistry could see him right away. Oh, there's the needle. But wait, he didn't even flinch. I thought a root canal would be much worse. My brother, 230, is sleeping through all of this. The Total Dentistry team makes this look so easy and simple. Maybe it's because they do this every day. Well, my brother 30 is done now, and he doesn't even remember a thing. Maybe now we can all get a good night's rest. I love Total Dentistry because they know teeth are people too. Total Dentistry, 847-358-2477, or visit totaldentistry.org. Total Dentistry, a general dental practice like no other.
This is WCPT 820, where facts matter.
Welcome back to Think Theory Radio. This is Damien, and today we are destroying the myths of Thanksgiving. We call it Thanks-taking. And it's interesting, I'm all for celebrating with family. I mean, and to admit my own hypocrisy, I've always celebrated Thanksgiving with my family. And I always, kind of in my head would tell myself, well, this isn't about, that. It's about family, and it's something different now. And, and try to tell myself that. Which is true in a lot of ways, but I feel like maybe now's the time to kind of either create it as a different holiday. I mean, it can still be a gathering of family and friends and a big feast.
I never bought into the Pilgrims and Indians story that they,
I never bought into
shoved
that.
down our throats as a kid. I think once I got, to a certain age, it was just like that was out the window for me.
Yeah, and it's messed up when you think about a lot of our history gets so watered down and whitewashed when you're a kid, like in grammar school. You learn all this stuff that you have to relearn everything as you get to an adult, you know? And if you don't bother to do so, a lot of people believe this is what really had. They believe that, the Pilgrims they didn't even dress like the way they show. They didn't walk around wearing all black and
like buckles on their heads.
They actually, in a lot of archaeological digs in, Plymouth and everything, they found all kind of colorful clothing and, different garments. Same thing. There was the Wampanoags, they did not wear big headdresses. They wore totally different clothing. They were, part of the other thing is the whole myth of like they were savages, and the Europeans came here and they didn't know, right from left or whatever. And it's like, no, these people that were here for thousands of years were very advanced.
That's always the part that kind of cracks me up about the Native American or indigenous people story. Whenever they meet colonized people or people from civilization, it's like oh, they don't know civilization. We must teach them. And it's like, but they somehow have been tribal for thousands upon thousands of years. And you're telling me just because they don't have permanent buildings, these people aren't civilized?
Exactly. And the other thing too is we're not taught there's differences in the different tribes and buildings throughout the throughout the country. I mean, here in the Illinois and Wisconsin, they built huge pyramids, like big pyramid mounds, and had massive cities. The Cahokia downstate, by the time the Europeans got, that was the biggest city in the world. Was it like, people in teepees in the middle of the woods? No, this was like large organized societies.
But because they didn't give their money to some sort of church or something, or
and that's part of it.
Bow down to a white man.
That's a big part of it too. Is they did not really believe in capitalism. Like they didn't have that capitalist mentality. They believed more in relationships and families and structure and that kind of societal structure in that way, as opposed to kind of making money. And the corporate part of it is a big part of the establishment of the United States. I mean, the Pilgrims themselves had to incorporate themselves. They had to create a corporation in order to be able to send money back to England. A lot of these early, colonizers that came over were all part of some kind of corporation. The Dutch corporation, the Boston Tea Party thing. That was they were attacking the I forget the name, the British Tea company. Yeah. There was a lot of like corporate. Now, yeah, they had a king and the money was going to him, but there was these corporate entities underneath, and the native people were like, "What are you talking about? You can't buy land. Land is just there.
Yeah,
you don't buy water." I mean, think about that concept. And the names, I found the names. So the Wampanoag tribe leader, the Massasoit, if I'm saying that right, his name was Ausamaquin, I believe is how you say it. So he was the original leader that worked with the Pilgrims and kind of established this treaty. And it was his son was a Pumetakam, is the one that they chopped up his head and put it on a spike. And yeah, before we get to more of these details, let's take a phone call. We got Jim in Chicago. What's going on, Jim?
Hi, guys. How are you? I'm just thinking about the Anglican Church founded by Henry VIII. I mean, he tried to crush the Irish with it. Then these characters come over. I don't know what their beef was with the Anglican Church. It probably was like the Jehovah's Witnesses or something. In that regard, there's a break off of that. But I think they were still under the rule of the English. There's a book out. There's a Socrates Indian, actually a Socrates, who talked to the Jesuit priest. He would sit there for hours and they'd discuss what he thought of civilization. And it went on and on and on. But this actually was incorporated in our Declaration of Independence. Because you got to remember, Thomas Paine would argue with Burke would argue that the king was sovereign, that God put the king, and Paine would argue, are you insane? Because God never intended people to have kings and queens. But the thing is, what's missing out of our history is what contributions the Indians made toward the Constitution of the United States. I think if we understood that better, we would have treated them a lot better. That's all I have to say. The other thing I have to say, the Irish are, you see that Alabama laid an egg and so did Ohio State. So it looks like Notre Dame's in. Anyway, have a great show.
All right, thanks, Jim. Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's the thing, let's, reteach history and incorporate, I've said this on the show before, that why does American history start in 1492? At Columbus, we should go back the thousands of years to the indigenous people and add that in. This is part. They are still here. The Wampanoags are still there in Massachusetts, and they actually they run a museum, the Plymouth Patuxet Museum, which is more the indigenous side of the story of Thanksgiving and just their history, their tribal history.
So you haven't gotten to the story of Thanksgiving yet, though, the hows and whys of the big feast.
Well, what happened? So there's a lot of different thoughts. Now, there was a celebration of harvest that appears to have happened some point in November of 1621. So the Pilgrims did come over in 1620. They got here in November. Like I said, they went through the winter that, they couldn't really survive. A lot of them, half of them, I believe half died. And then, in the spring, created this tribe. They taught them how to grow corn and other things that they needed to do. Now, the other thing, too, is that the Pilgrims, when they got here, they found a native village. So they kind of they literally found a native village that all these Patuxet people and Wampanoags had died off from the smallpox, that we think. And so there was literally just this ghost town with corpses. I mean, I'm talking about dead bodies and bones in these homes, and the Pilgrims are just like, hey, God gave us this. They believe, it was all God. God brought them there. God saved their life. God got them through the storms. This is...
Thank you, blessed Lord, for killing these people so that we may move in and mooch off of, and squat on their land. Yeah.
So when they had their harvest, they had this by this point, they had the treaty, and they were having which is Thanksgiving is a very kind of old tradition. I mean, it goes back thousands of years to cultures all over the world. It's just a harvest celebration. I mean, ever since humans have been farming and agriculture, they've had some kind of harvest celebration.
Mm-hmm.
So it's basically what it is. And they didn't actually invite the Wampanoags. What happened was their Thanksgiving was a big celebration. They had, sports, and they had games, and they had shooting contests. And as they were shooting off their muskets in the air, because of the treaty, the Wampanoags thought, oh, they're being attacked. Let's go over there and see what's going on, help out or whatever.
Yeah.
And then they thought it was a party. So they brought, now there's different beliefs in that some say they were used to the gunshots and they figured something was going on. So they brought, now they did bring a bunch of deer. They brought 5 deer and some other things to eat. And there was actually more indigenous people there than there was pilgrims at the time. I think it says that Ausamakan, he brought about 90 of his tribal members, and there was maybe about 40 or 50 pilgrims in the village there. So you had so they did have that. They did eat together, and they played sports together. I don't know, mingled. But there was no turkey, supposedly. No turkey, no pies.
Yeah. Well, that came later, didn't it? The whole idea of turkey.
Yeah, there's no evidence or record of them serving turkey. They probably did serve some kind of fowl or duck or something. They did eat the deer. They had plenty of different vegetables and corn and beans and stuff like that. There were no pies.
Yeah, no pumpkin pie or anything like that?
No, because they didn't have any butter and they didn't have any hearths.
Yeah.
So that was not a thing. and it wasn't for years later that the actual Thanksgiving tradition became something, right? I mean, I'm trying to find so it was the 1830s that the event was first called Thanksgiving by New Englanders.
Okay.
So you're talking about 200 years later, And actually when I was reading it said for the separatists, something that would be called Thanksgiving would be totally different. And a Thanksgiving would actually be more in line with something like Lent, where they would fast and they would give thanks to God. It wasn't they would call this, what we call Thanksgiving would be more called rejoicing. And the holiday wasn't made official until 1863, when Lincoln declared it as kind of a thank you for the Civil War victories in Vicksburg, Mississippi, and Gettysburg. So it didn't become official, for 240 years after the fact. And there's a lot of myths about the whole Plymouth Rock thing. Like, did they really sit at this rock? Probably not.
I thought it was just like a landmark that they landed near.
Yeah, I mean, there's the different stories that they sat around this rock and, figured out what they were going to do.
I never heard that. I thought they just crashed near it or something. It was like,
that's
all right,
pretty much what happened. I mean, yeah. There was a little bit more to it than that. They ended up near Cape Cod and they sent out the strangers. The strangers went out into the strange land, and they actually started looking for areas to settle. So it wasn't like this, like they hit a rock and they crashed and everything. Like I said, the Mayflower was okay and it went back.
Yeah,
Captain John, he took him back. He's like, I'll see you guys later.
It's always a John.
Yeah, exactly right. Let's go back to the phone lines. So we got Dave in Hoffman Estates. What's going on, Dave?
Hey, Damien. Hey, Paul. If I recall right, when you're talking about the turkey and that, didn't Benjamin Franklin want the turkey to be the national symbol bird instead of the eagle?
Yeah, I did. I remember hearing that.
I've heard that. Yeah,
mm-hmm. Yeah, because I think it was more prevalent.
Right away,
Yeah, it was more of a prevalent bird. It's actually not that great of a bird to eat. I mean, if you're gonna, I'm vegetarian, so I don't care. But
it's delicious. I'm not a huge fan of turkey, but gosh, deep fried turkey.
But I mean, if you were to pick. Out of all
we did chicken for our Thanksgiving this year, and it was great.
Yeah, but no, I have heard that, Dave.
Maybe that's why, like when you were saying about that, they you don't believe that they had turkey, or maybe that's why they didn't. You know.
Yeah, they probably like, why would you eat that? Bring the duck. You know.
Yeah, or maybe I understand. I never hunted them, but I understand they're very, very hard to hunt too. That they're almost more wary than a deer. You know,
oh, really?
The guys have got to be all camouflaged up, and they got a call. You know, call them in. And,
yeah.
And,
I have seen
a little bit. They get spooked. So
the
maybe
turkey
that's why
vulture.
They didn't have turkey either. They couldn't get one with a bow and arrow or something. You know.
You ever see a turkey vulture? I saw one in Mexico. It flew into the yard we were staying in and just flew right in.
Yeah.
Those things are huge.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, they're pretty chill. It didn't do anything, but it's like, what is that?
Something too why they got no feathers on their face. You know, because when they're going into that dead carrion and stuff like that, that's you know, bacteria or whatever. That's why that's why they don't have the feathers on the face. But yeah, they are one ugly-looking bird.
Yeah, definitely.
Anyway, listen, you guys have a good, you know, remainder of the holiday, and just thought I'd share that little bit and see if you had all heard that too, or you know.
Yeah, no, yeah, I have heard that.
Yeah.
All right, thanks, Dave.
Thank you, Dave.
Have a good weekend.
See you all, guys. You too. Bye-bye.
And yeah, so
imagine if the turkey was our national bird. Like, what would we be eating
hilarious.
turkey? I mean, you know, then we got to go back and figure out when. You said, what, 1830 was when New England was starting to recognize.
Yeah, and then 1863 is when Lincoln made it official.
Yeah. And is that when turkey was officially the Thanksgiving bird?
That I cannot find.
Because I can't imagine that, you know, the way we kind of mass farm turkeys to sell, you know, that had to be something along the way that has happened where, like, every household, you know, the privilege of every household in the United States can eat a turkey on Thanksgiving if they had the ways and means to do it. Like,
I want to say that happened more in the 20th century.
Absolutely. I would think. Post-war United States, for sure.
And especially that became, you know, that was a time in history when marketing and branding really started to hit. And like, you know, people trying to kind of sell things like, hey, you got to get your Thanksgiving, you know, your turkey for your Thanksgiving dinner. You know, it's tradition. It's like, is it really? You know,
it is now.
It is now for sure. What's interesting too is like I thought about some people were talking about mac and cheese, and you know, some do it, some people do it, some people don't.
Yeah.
But mac and cheese has a little bit more kind of American relevance. It was a dish. It's actually French, but it was brought over by Thomas Jefferson, supposedly.
Okay.
And he had his slaves make it.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how it ended up being in African American culture.
Okay.
So there's that.
Yeah, but is that a Thanksgiving?
And they didn't have sweet potatoes yet in the original Thanksgiving. Sweet potatoes weren't even in the Americas yet.
And I would have assumed that it was, but I don't know where. Well, sweet potatoes
are
from
more
Africa. Like a warmer region. Yeah.
Yeah, it comes from Africa. It wasn't here yet. There were potatoes in South America, I believe, but they didn't come up here yet.
Yeah.
They might have had white potatoes or something like that, but not sweet potatoes or yams, candy. They definitely didn't have candy yams. You know, and it's interesting too, like I was reading about how the Wampanoag tribe, you know, who are the ones that helped the Pilgrims, they barely got federally recognized until recently.
Yeah.
You know, so here's this like, okay, supposedly, you know, this, you know, beautiful cross-cultural connection, and they help the Pilgrims, and this
American treasures.
Yeah,
American
but you don't
treasures,
federally recognize them until like the late, you know, the 2017 or something like that. Well, but like I said, it very epitomizes American culture in so many different ways. And I know we got to take a break. When we come back, I want to talk about the influence of Native Americans on the Constitution and American democracy, and also other contributions that Native Americans have given to us. And give us a call, 773-763-9278. That's 773-763-WCPT. We'll be back with more Think Theory Radio.
Amy Goodman reports on the news stories rarely covered by the corporate media.
In Chile, security forces shot dead 2 indigenous Mapuche leaders during clashes in the province of Arauco. The southern coastal region has been under a state of emergency, with the Chilean government deploying 2,000 soldiers to the region as it attempts to suppress the Mapuche community and their fight to recover their ancestral lands.
Democracy Now! Weekday evenings at 11 on WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk.
By texting 64000, you agree to receive recurring automated marketing messages from Eucora. Message and data rates may apply. No purchase required. TNC and privacy policy found at eucora.com/TNC.
UTIs are the worst. One year, I had 8 UTIs. If you get UTIs, you understand how awful the cycle is. I was taking all the precautions, and cranberry products just didn't work. It was hard on me and my husband.
I hated seeing her in pain, and I wanted to help.
We're Jenna and Spencer, founders of Eucora.
With my background in biochemistry and our shared frustration over UTIs, we were inspired to start Eucora.
We make UTI relief products and innovative urinary tract supplements that give you a way to be proactive. At Eucora, we've helped over 200,000 people get their lives back. We have a money-back guarantee, so you can try risk-free. If you're not happy, you'll get a full refund. You have nothing to lose. Try Eucora today. Get 30% off Eucora when you text HEALTH to 64,000. Text HEALTH to 64,000 to get 30% off. That's HEALTH to 64000.
You're listening to WCPT 820 because facts matter.
Welcome back to Think Theory Radio. This is Damien, and today we are exploring and exploding.
There you go.
The myths of Thanksgiving and kind of American history in general. Because I think, there's a lot we need to look in the mirror and face. I mean, this could go deeper and, if we started getting into slavery and everything like that. But this is something, it's like if you don't learn your history, you're doomed to repeat it, right? And this is why things keep happening on and on and on. And we need to learn from our past. And this is part of our past.
You mean a statue's not enough?
No, yes. Statue's not enough.
I was looking for my in. I was like, there's got to be some sort of joke with statues. That was it. That's all you get, folks.
Oh, all right. So speaking of, not rewriting history, but reteaching history, I should say. There's a lot of contributions Native Americans and indigenous people of the Americas have contributed to the world and this country. That could be a big part of teaching kids, hey, these people were important. They were human, right? And they were advanced people who had an advanced society. So much the fact that...
And they don't even have a day in the United States. I know that there's Indigenous Peoples Day, but it's not recognized yet.
Well, what's interesting too is that, so Native American Heritage Month is November.
Okay.
That's kind of odd to me. It's I think
it's
in the same month as
probably for the twofer of Thanksgiving, though.
Yeah.
Even though we're establishing right now that it's really a different story than the true story. So
exactly right.
But that doesn't surprise me. But I think we're beating a dead horse by talking about Columbus Day and how we shouldn't have Columbus Day and we should have Indigenous Peoples Day. But considering the contributions and considering all the other things we celebrate in this country, why not then?
Oh, for sure. And, and the other thing, too, it's there are plenty of, not to get too far off track, but just to say, you could have Indigenous Peoples Day, and if you wanted to have something celebrating an Italian American or other Italians, there are so many other important Italian people.
I was saying he wasn't even really Italian; he was Genoan, which wasn't even part of Italy at the time. We've already talked about this. Yeah.
I say make it Enrico Fermi Day.
There you go.
Is,
a true Italian,
American, who,
and some
broke the atom.
Some local roots here too. Yeah,
and so another big influence is actually on the U.S. Constitution. So there was the Iroquois Confederacy, which consisted of 6 different tribal nations. That was a huge influence on the U.S. Constitution. So at the time of the Constitutional Convention, there were really no contemporary democracies in Europe where they could, draw from. And, by this point, there had been, this was hundreds of years of Europeans. Thomas Jefferson's dad, his father in Williamsburg would have dinner with Cherokee chiefs. So you had people who were familiar with the Iroquois and other tribes and the way that they structured their forms of government. And it was very similar in a way that they had the Iroquois Confederacy that was basically a kind of the federal government. So you had this kind of unifying federal government, but then each tribe had their own laws at the local level. So you had that federal and local kind of government. And now it wasn't an exact model for the U.S. Constitution, but it definitely showed like a more real life example of, the political concepts that the framers of the Constitution wanted to use. And so that's pretty interesting. I mean, and I think that's something that should be taught, that there was this influence of people that were here before the Europeans on, what we consider one of the greatest documents in the formation of the American democracy, the U.S. Constitution. And even the House of Representatives takes a lot from this same Confederacy, because they did a similar thing where they had, I believe it was a representation based on population from each tribe within this kind of within this Confederacy of the Six Nations. So there's a lot of different influence on it, and I think that's something, we should talk about. Now, the other thing is some of the, what I was talking about earlier is we need to get rid of this concept that, the native and indigenous people were savages and like they didn't know what,
Yeah, right, yeah.
Like, no, these were advanced people that were doing things that like Europeans weren't even doing yet. Mm-hmm. Case in point, syringes. Now, I'm combining, now some of this is indigenous people to the United States, but this is also South America, Mexico, and syringes, hypodermic needles. It says pre-Columbian South American Indians use type of syringe made from sharpened hollow bird bones attached to small bladders to inject medicine, irrigate wounds, or even clean ears. Additionally, indigenous healers also used larger and similar instruments for enemas.
Thank you for calling Think Theory Radio.
They actually also had baby bottles and formula. The Seneca used washed, dried, and oiled bear intestines with a bird quill attached as a form of a nipple. Mothers filled them with a mixture of pounded nuts, meat, and water. They also had oral contraception, believe it or not. They had Native Americans taking such substances to date back to the 1700s. It was more than 200 years before the creation of man-made contraceptives by Western medicine. One of the herbs used was the stone seed, employed by the Shoshone, while the Potawatomi used the herb dogbane. So that's pretty cool. Now we know tobacco comes from here. Cigars. That was, the Mayans were doing that thousands of years ago.
Thank you so much.
Pest control, which is very interesting. So the Paiutes, I could probably say that wrong, the Shoshone of the Great Basin, for example, wash their hair in a hot infusion made from sweet root. And that was to combat lice infestation. To fight other pests, pre-Columbian people built structures with cashew wood, while the Pima sprinkled ashes on their crops to thwart squash bugs. The Pueblo used ground buffalo gourd to fend off garden pests, and Inca cotton farmers planted lemon verbena and burned it as pesticide. They also had bunk beds. The Iroquois they lived in long houses, long extended buildings made of branches formed into a large half circle and covered with bark, not teepees. And inside these long houses were bunk beds. Their creation of two beds, obviously, you know that. And now pharmaceuticals too. Native Americans in the U.S. were using medicinal uses for 2,000 at least. Now, this is according to Daniel Moorman, who's he's an expert on Native American ethnobotany in the United States. 2,564 different plant species. But some people say that the actual number probably would dwarf those statistics. And since the time that the Spanish came over, the Native Americans' medicines have been used to cure colds with guaiacum, heart ailments with dogbane, and employ foxglove and lady slipper as a sedative. Interesting. And chewing gum. Right? So the Mesoamericans chewed the milky chicle, which became today's chewing gum. So chiclets actually is stealing from the native name. And then, of course, there's lacrosse, the only true American sport. It was also
you too. Thank you so much.
The Iroquois, Turtle Island's indigenous peoples created an entire sports genre. The Iroquois creators' game of lacrosse has been played for centuries. And it was played by these tribes who honored the game as it was played for the creators' enjoyment. Hammocks are another invention. Mouthwash as well. Various tribes in northeastern North America used wildflower gold thread, Coptis trifolia, as a mouthwash and treatment for oral pain. So that's pretty cool. They also did raised bed agriculture, cable suspension bridges, snow goggles. Now I'm just kind of listing them because it'll take too long to go read everything. Kayaks. I mean, rubber. I've talked about that on the show before, how they were using rubber long before native. Now they weren't making wheels. They were using them for other different, making balls and different other
But they saw
objects.
the value in the rubber tree.
Yep. So it's interesting, there's so many. I mean, just think of the fact they had mouthwash, they had, birth control, they had syringes hundreds of years before Europeans had it.
Yeah.
But yet they were savages.
But it's just because if they're nomadic or don't have permanent settlement or don't use up, so many resources, they're uncivilized according to.
Well,
all
and a
these
lot of it
settlers
is
coming
religion
in.
too. You don't believe in Jesus.
Yeah.
What kind of devil god do you pray to?
Yeah. Someone get them a Bible.
Yeah. That's the crazy thing about the whole Mormon thing too. I don't want to get into that, but
derail the whole show here. But one of the caller called in and wanted to give a shout out to the movie The Mission with Robert De Niro from 1986. Okay. It's about the experiences of a Jesuit missionary in 18th century South America.
Okay.
So just can't really go into much more detail than that, but he said that it reminded him of that. So
cool. I know there's a movie from like the 50s or 60s. I can never remember the name. Maybe you can Google it real quick. That's about. We'll get to that caller. Yeah. But it's about a Aztec. I figured he was a king or prince, wherever, but he got taken into slavery, went over to Spain. He was able to escape and made it back. And then you have this whole thing with like Cortez and everything. And it's interesting because there's one part in the movie where one of the Spaniards goes up to him and he's like, why are you back here or whatever, this and that. He goes, we never wanted to go to your land and make you pray to our God.
Yeah.
You see the European's face just like, oh.
50s or 60s movie, you were
50s
saying?
or 60s, yeah.
Okay, I'll look it up.
Okay. Let's take one more call before we wrap up the show. We got Brian and Joliet. What's going on, Brian?
Hey, how's it going, guys?
Good.
Good. Well, I just wanted to check in and along the same lines you were talking about the Iroquois, and there was a documentary. Do you remember Bill Moyers?
Bill Moyers. Yeah, we're here.
Well, Bill Moyers used to do documentaries on PBS, and one of them was with an Iroquois, a tribal leader by the name of Oren, O-R-E-N, Lyons, L-Y-O-N-S, and it was about an hour and a half, and he explained a lot about Iroquois traditions and religion, and he said it was a matriarchy, Iroquois. And then 1972, my freshman year in high school, had an English teacher who told us, and I read it, Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee, the book, a very important book. And then, I don't know, I was a junior or a senior, I forget. I had a history teacher who told us to make sure to check out a movie, an hour and a half made-for-TV movie called Chief Joseph and the Nez Perce, I Will Fight No More Forever. was the name of it, and you might want to look into that. And then in 1982, I took a course for my master's Native American philosophy, and I did a paper on the media image of Native Americans in movies and television, and all the negative stereotypes of Native Americans, and then there were some positives, but for the most part, the stereotypes in the movies, it's changed a bit now.
Yeah.
But for the most part, growing up, the Westerns was a big deal and all that. The Native Americans were always, wrong, on television.
Oh, totally.
Little Big Man asked the viewer to understand and sympathize with the Sioux, the Native Americans. And some of it's very funny, and some of it, makes you want to cry.
Oh, yeah.
The movie asks you to put yourself in the position of the Native Americans.
Okay. Have you ever read Indian Givers?
Pardon?
Have you ever read the book Indian Givers?
No, I haven't.
That's a really good. It's by anthropologist Jack Weatherford. It's called Indian Givers: How the Indians of the Americas Transformed the World. He also wrote a book called Native Roots. Yeah, it's really good.
I'll check that out.
All right. Well, we got to wrap it up, Brian. I want to thank you for the call.
Well, thank you guys, and always a great show from you guys.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate that. Yeah, thanks for calling in, and have a great weekend.
You too. Bye.
Bye. And yeah, some interesting stuff there. I wish he would have called in earlier because I would have liked to hear more about the Native American philosophy course that he was in. That sounded pretty cool.
Yeah.
But so this was another great show. I want to appreciate and thank everybody who listened and called in. And we'll be back again next week and every Saturday right here on WCPT 820, 6 to 7 p.m., Think Theory Radio.
By texting 64,000, you agree to receive recurring automated marketing messages from Eucora. Message and data rates may apply. No purchase required. TNC and privacy policy found at eucora.com/TNC.
UTIs are the worst. One year, I had 8 UTIs. If you get UTIs, you understand how awful the cycle is. I was taking all the precautions, and cranberry products just didn't work. It was hard on me and my husband.
I hated seeing her in pain, and I wanted to help.
We're Jenna and Spencer, founders of Eucora.
With my background in biochemistry and our shared frustration over UTIs, we were inspired to start Eucora.
We make UTI relief products and innovative urinary tract supplements that give you a way to be proactive. At Eucora, we've helped over 200,000 people get their lives back. We have a money-back guarantee, so you can try risk-free. If you're not happy, you'll get a full refund. You have nothing to lose. Try Eucora today. Get 30% off Eucora when you text HEALTH to 64,000. Text HEALTH to 64,000 to get 30% off. That's HEALTH to 64000.
This is WCPT 820, where you can hear the Stephanie Miller Show every weekday, 8 to 11 a.m., because facts matter.